in our last conversation, you instructed me to broaden my circle, to expand my energy, to start calling in or intending for more unexpected, more different.
So,
And go ahead, sorry.
no, you go ahead.
And for the last 3 days or last 4 days or since that channeling and since that intention's been set, it felt like more new experiences have been entering reality.
So, is it that new experiences are entering into your awareness? Or are you allowing yourself to notice them? Are you allowing yourself to cast your net farther and bigger and more expanded so to be aware of what is present?
That, the second one,
Yes.
and you recognize that too, that that was the case.
We believe that the conversation that we had with you allowed you to step into a reality where your mind accepted that there is a realm that there are possibilities, options, opportunities that the mind doesn't understand or see. And once the mind accepted this as reality, it sort of created an opening in your energy field. It created an expansion, a receptivity of more. Because the more that you have experienced, the extra, we should say, is simply because you allowed it to be. You allowed yourself to experience it, to receive it, to be in it. Because it has always been there. It's that you were not able to see it because of the mind limiting your peripheral view.
Now today, so let's say we had, or I had 3 or 4 good solid days of that expanded awareness. Now today almost feels like the opposite,
Yes.
where it's very stormy outside, it's unpleasant to leave the house. My body feels sore from playing in a disc golf tournament yesterday. And really, it almost feels like the opposite of what those 3 or 4 days felt like. And I almost wonder if that's orchestrated on purpose for some reason, because I feel like I've had this experience before, or other people, where we step into this new vibration, and then after a certain amount of time, it's almost like it gets pulled out, or we revert back to the old in an even more intense way for some reason. Can you explain
So
that?
there's no regression. Revert does not exist. It's the ebb and the flow, the contraction and the expansion. You are able to, now that you have been able to step into a new frequency. What happens is that there are still parts of your being, more specifically the mind for this particular case, that is still under the old frequency, under the old program. And what happens is in the contraction, there in the expansion, there's a contraction that happens, a sort of an elastic band reflex, where there's so much expansion that there's like a comfort, there's like your baseline, it goes back to a baseline. And why this happens is because the whole of you is not yet able to sustain it for longer periods of time. So this is the dance of the ebb and flow that we've been talking about for quite some time. And the more you allow this dance, you are playing with the current future version of you, interfacing with past program version of you. And the retraction of the elastic band, the knee-jerk reaction from expansion to contraction, is simply you interfacing back into the comfort level of the baseline, the older baseline. You understand?
Yes, because it's not something I felt that I chose. It really felt like reality came back and said, "Oh, you want to practice a new frequency? Too bad for you. We're going to pull you back to the old one."
And it's not too bad for you. It's sort of a rest period, but at the same time, how are you going to choose your choice point from this point. If you're thrown into the lion's den, how are you going to react? Right? So it's really about, it's not testing. It's not that you are being tested. And we understand the concept of being tested by the universe for humans. It's that within the ebb and the ebb is needed not only for a rest period, and we say this, do you understand what we mean by this?
Yes.
It's sort of, if you expand, it's not super sustainable, where the contraction is sort of needed for the body to catch up.
It's part of the integration.
It is part of the integration. And you are allowing all of the yous to sort of keep track, or to stay on track, to sort of catch up, is what we really wanted to say.
So when we find ourselves being pulled back into the old frequency, like I was today or have been today,
the first thing you will notice is that you have resistance in the fact that you are back in the quote unquote old habit of vibration, right?
yes.
So once you notice that there's frustration or resistance, the number one thing to do in those instances is soften the resistance. Allow yourself to be in the contracted state. Allow yourself to be in the older program. Because that version of you needs more compassion than it needs to be fixed or changed.
So accept the nature of the ebbs and flows, and not to be hard on yourself for being back into this old vibration.
Yes.
And then the next step is the same thing you did to step out of it in the first place.
So we will say it this way. So perhaps you woke up this morning, started noticing evidence of the the contracted state, and then the resistance kicked in because it didn't feel so good, and then probably some older thought patterns also attached to it, and it also didn't feel so good. And then part of you was perhaps trying to not only fix it, but try to shift it, or try to bring yourself out of it, or try to jump over it, or not be in it. Instead of landing in the frequency of, oh, I'm in the contraction right now. Today feels like a shitty day. But does it feel like a shitty day because you are resisting the contracted state of the fact that, yes, it's raining out. Yes, there's nothing to do. Yes, you're stuck at home. ... It doesn't really matter what the circumstances are. It simply matters how are you interfacing with what is being given. Are you resisting it? Are you allowing it? Because
Yes.
there's a big difference in the flow. If you would have sat down and said, you know what, there's nothing to do, I'm choosing to have a lazy day, a lazy rainy day, and I'm going to make it super cozy, and I'm going to make it as pleasant and fun as I can.
And sleep for most of the day,
And
which is what I
sleep.
did. Yes.
And allow that to be okay. Allow that to be, this is the day where I get to sleep and rest up for the next, for my week. The more you fall into that frequency, and by falling we mean land, we mean accepting, own it, claim it, the easier the recovery period becomes. And then from a rested state, you get to choose a new choice point. Perhaps not on this day, but perhaps in the next morning, perhaps in the next moment. It really depends where you're at.
So really the answer is just practicing non-resistance.
All the time. This will be the answer for a lot of questions.
Sounds easy enough.
And do you know how to release your own resistance? Do you know how to allow the resistance to be there? Do you know how to make friends with your resistance? Do you know how to love the resistance? To have compassion for the resistance? Do you understand? This
Yes.
is a deeper level that we are taking you with these words than simply saying, oh, you don't have to be resistant to the resistance. No, we want you to be such a master at this that you recognize that there's resistance and you go love it. And you accept that there's a version of you that needs that resistance.
And embrace
in
it,
this
because
moment.
it is about up-levelment. It is about expansion.
Yes.
It is happening for a positive reason when we allow it.
Absolutely. And the more rest and the more slowness that you allow and not fight it, the faster you will go in the long run. You will get to where you want to go, this is metaphorically speaking, faster by taking these rest periods that are basically showing up naturally in the organic unfolding. But are you allowing them or are you fighting them? Because if you're fighting the resting the whole day, you're not really resting, are you?
Absolutely.
So this is a good conversation for both you and Anik. Just a reminder.
A permission slip for more rest
Yes, of course.
and slowing down.
Mm-hmm.